Good afternoon. I hope you can all hear me. I hope you can all see my screen. If you are not, please prompt me whenever you would like to. Um, this afternoon, we will have 1 hour seminar uh, covering for information security, risk management, which has just come up with new standard about risk management. So this is our content. My name is Mustafa Kumut. I'm lead auditor and the tutor of this webinar. Before we go to our topic, I would like to give you some information about CFE CERT, what is our company, what we deal, and what is our purpose of this webinar. CFE CERT is an independent auditing company. It's an accredited company coming from the UK. UCAS and ISS operating in many countries. CFA is a cert member of the British Education Accreditation Authority CPD certification service, provides for gap analysis, training, audit, certification services in many areas such as information security, business continuity, IT service management, quality management, GDPR, and personal data management system. Before we move, also, I would like to give the tutor or the lecturer that who is going to deal with you. I have graduated from University of London, King's College. I did my first and second degree. I also completed my Master of Philosophy degree. I lived in UK for 7 years. When I come to Turkey, I started as a field engineer for companies called ABB, Asea Brown Boveri, as a field engineer. After that, I moved to the banking industry, starting from IT manager, and then move up to the other bank, which is called Alternative Bank, and starting also new domain for me is the IT audit manager. And then I moved to the information security field in another bank, which is the biggest bank in Turkey, Ziraat Technology. Having completed for banking industry experience, I shifted to the telecommunication industry, which is Vodafone. I worked for Vodafone for 16 years, business resilience and data privacy senior manager and DPO, data privacy officer. I acted for 16 years. After completed for my experience in telco, now I started beginning of this year, Turkish technology, Turkish Airlines, which is the aviation industry, starting from this year. This is for my snapshot of my career. I work as an IT consultant for business resilience, data privacy, and information security. I have a huge experience for best practices, ISO domain, starting from 27001, 22301, 20000, 37001, which is anti-bribery. The previous one is information security and business continuity, emergency management, and also GDPR. I have been also certified for GDPR, Data Privacy Officer certification from this company. This is for my snapshot. Thank you very much also for you sharing your time and your knowledge with our company, with me. I hope we will all enjoy this webinar. Before also, we would like to, maybe if you'd like to introduce yourself, just one of you, or how, which company you work, or what is your experience, how your experience for information security. Can somebody express himself? I've got one question previously. Azam, would you like to explain yourself? If you hear me. Okay. We will go for our session. Our agenda is for risk standards, structure and the purpose of ISO 27005 for standard, and also for our business, how this standard helps our business, and what is changed for the new standard, annexes and other information, and also if you got some questions, that please do question me. Before we finish this structure, after 1 hour, we will have half an hour exam. We would like to give you a certificate. You've got multiple choice test covering for 5 questions. If you have succeed, you will get for your certification. And also, we would like to provide you for 1-day course for covering for this topic. If you are interested, then if you enjoy the course, please do so. Okay, I got one response. Thank you very much, Nima. You are a lead auditor from TÜV. Thank you very much. And also one colleague from Pankaj Tiwari from India, working for OYO Hotel and Homes. Thank you very much. Well, let's go start from the beginning, maybe the basics. This is our standard, which is the father of all risk standards, which is called ISO 3130. But this is the risk management standard, which is the foundations of other standards. What we have, this standard covers for risk management guide and also risk assessment techniques. So 31010 covering for risk assessment techniques, 31000, which is the risk management guide. Below that, we have got previously you have come across IS risk management guide, which is now we are going through, and other one is coming from the privacy impact assessment ISO 29134. Another one is 27557 covering for organizational privacy risk management. Since ISO stuff all covers for this kind of numbers, like we are going to Chinese restaurant, calling for this, for give me the 61 please, something like that. It's difficult to remember all numbers, but you have to be coming across with every time for risk management is 31000, and the risk management guide, which is now 27005, which is this our standard. Starting from the beginning, risk management guidelines, previous ones, is about guidelines for managing risks, covering for the organizations. Application of these guidelines can be customized for all the companies. Another standard released, 31010, which is released in 2019, is a risk management covering for risk assessment techniques, which is published double logo standard with ISO, provides guidance and selection of application techniques for assessing risks in several situations. Having said that, also we've got another standard covering specific for cybersecurity and privacy protection, 27557, which is also released in 2022, and application for organizational privacy risk management. Now, this is, as you see, all the standards coming from the beginning of risk management guide. So what is our standard? It says for It's an international standard, specifically says that how to perform information security risk assessment within the scope of compliance with ISO 27001. It is this standard usually is a guidance for how, when you want to implement 27001, it provides a guidance how you are going to implement, specific for risk management. So this is quite essential book, like a guidance you need to use for information security domain. Details formally identifying, analyze, evaluate, and processing of all information security vulnerabilities and covering for information security management system. Implementation, essential references is covered for the information security risk management activities, and also plus another clause coming from the previous 1 year ago just released, clause 6.1 and clause 8. These are the risks that we are going to see here. Implementation of risk management guidance also covers for information security, but as I told you, this is the beginning of these standards. We have to all, like a Bible, what is risk management? We all look up for a risk management standard. This standard contains detailed guidance of risk management and supplementary guidance in ISO IEC for 27003. What this standard helps business? As you information security people, we always would like to see our triangle. Our triangle is, as you know, confidentiality, integrity, and availability. So in order to identify the risks and to make use of information security, we have to use and identify the risks specifically for information security. 27005 also quite compact with 27001. It covers all requirements related to information security in this standard. So these standard specifically, we will come later, specifically risk-based. This is a complementary framework for information security. We will have several organizations, they want to improve their information security risk management process. And also we want to imply for the people what is impacted for personal. So we will have to make use for this standard as well. So this is quite applicable for corporate wide and also for individuals. This is the for changes starting from 2008 and up to previous year. Started from its first published, and after that it's they released as a compliance with 27001, which is 2005 version. They released it in 2011. After that, 2018, we are expecting there's a big changes, but it didn't come up. After 1 year ago, 2022, now we've just released this one. This is a minor update, but is you will see it says some kind of radical changes that we have to trace on it. This document prepared for joint technical company and also information technology subcommittees for related with information security, cyber security, and privacy protection. You remember our new standard for 27001 now covers also privacy and cyber security. Here also reflects these domains as well. Standard aligned with new standard of information security, which is last year published, 2022, and also aligned with risk management standard. Terminology also we will pick up from the father of the standards, which is the big one, 31000, and structure also adjusted according to the information security standard. So you see, whenever it comes from the information security standard, we map to the domains according to the standard for guidance as well. New concepts also introduced, risk scenario, and also event-based and asset-based approach and for the risk identification, and contents of the and revised and restructured. There's put it in a single appendix. These are changes, but we will go much more detail later on. Previous standard for information technology, security techniques, and information security risk management. Now, you will see information security, cyber security, and privacy protection, guidance on managing and information security risks, specifically for name change and covering for cyber security and privacy protection. Very important part now we will come across. Now, previously, we are using scenario for instant scenario. As I told you, this standard, or let's say the guidance, specifically uses for risk-based approach. So the term now changed, or let's say omitted, from instant to the risk. So this standard uses risk scenario, not using instant scenario. You will see the previous one. An instant scenario is the description of threat exploiting a certain vulnerability or set of vulnerabilities in an information security instance, which is stated in clause 13. Now, here is a risk scenario. It's not, it doesn't say instant. Risk scenario is now being used. Its definition is defined in section 314, sequence or the combination of events leading from the initial cause to the unwanted consequence to be aligned with the ISO 17666. So let me allow you one very bold point. Why we changed this? Can somebody tell or send me a question? Why people said this? Why we have changed? Why we are using risk? Why we are not using instant? Okay, if not, I will give your my answer. You see, now we are using much more structure-based approach. We need to use to define impact coming from the all risks management stuff. So we are, it's quietly identified the situation, more monetary values we are dealing with. So we are using risk, not instant, because when we come to the risk, it's quite easy to make the calculation, make the approach, use the scientific to identify the situation. That's the one of the things that major change that in my mind. Of course, this is my explanation, but based on my expert view, risk-based approach now all standards is also as well. Impact of the instant scenarios is to be determined considering for the impact criteria and also defining the context establishment for the activity. It may affect one or more assets or part of the assets. So we are using for risk-based approach to identify for the impact. Instant cases is difficult to evaluation, but here is much more scientific approach that we are going to deal with. Also, assets also align with the values for their financial costs and also their business consequence, either is damaged or compromised. I'm also a business resilience expert. When we deal with business impact analysis, we identify if there is a cyber-related issue, how much this gonna cost for the company, how we are going to damage, how we are going to retain our damage, how we are going to claim for our insurance company. So approach coming from the risk-based. Consequences may be of temporary nature or maybe the permanent, as in the case of destruction of an asset. This can be used for our risk-based approach. Another changes we are using for trigger criteria. Trigger criteria we are using for this term, which is a new addition to the standard. It provides guidance when to start the activity. It's a step for the framework or when to update it. For example, because of a change within the organization or according to a plan or a change in an external context of the organization, this can be updated. For example, when you change your company, when you see somebody that you change their organization, if the name is changed, there can be the action to enforce the situation. So the trigger is a guidance for when to start an activity. You have to make the assessment when you enforce this trigger action. So the trigger criteria is also coming from the new standard. Also, this helps to keep dynamic information security risk assessment, because all assets are, we cannot say that every time remains the same. It's quite dynamic situation. So if something will happen, you need to press the button. Document structure, comparing with the previous standard and also for the new standard, you will see again the domains remains in the same 6 domains, but now context establishment is no, it doesn't exist. We removed. Instead of this one, we started from the top, the IS Information Security Risk Management, Clause 5. Second is the context establishment starting after this one. So risk assessment here, we put it. Here we changed this structure starting from the risk, go to the context establishment. After that, now the previous one, risk treatment. Here also again risk treatment, but what is the difference now? Operation and leveraging related ISMS process. These two values that doesn't exist anymore. We just changing the word. We are using the risk acceptance and communication included in the clause 8. Information security risk treatment process in the 2018 version, and also the new version much more puts for the ISMS. So it's quite compact, perpetual action. So it keeps remaining the same model maybe, but keeps going for the risk management structure, either coming from the information security standard, also coming from the new standard as well. New standard is coming previous one. Structure is less aligned with the high level process. You will see it right now. You see the previous one, high level process, for the new standard reduces the risk acceptance block into a decision point as a dedicated block for the documented information. You will see here. So figure 2 illustrates for the information security risk management process is a iterative risk assessment or risk treatment activities. It can be done both, but iterative approach should be always conducting for risk assessment, increased deeply and detailed assessment of each iteration. Whenever you make the iteration, you keep on the same approach for the next item as well. Until that, when you see that there will be the residual risk remains, then you will enforce the risk management process again. Why we do this? Because iterative approach provides a good balance between minimizing the time and effort and identifying controls, while remains the ensuring that risks are appropriately assessed. So still starting from here, I assessed one process, and then I found something that I make another risk assessment based on what I have got, and then I move to the next item. I have made another assessment, and then I make the comparison between the previous one, and then according to my risk assessment criteria, whether is a high, medium, or low, or like that, I make another move. So this is iterative process coming from the new standard. Risk treatment, a high-level process comparing with previous one and the new one. This is a cyclic process. You remember assessing, starting from the risk treatment, deciding whether there is a residual risks are acceptable, then keep up with the risk level and generate a new risk treatment if risk levels are acceptable, and then assess the effectiveness of that treatment. This was what we have already been doing. Now, here is mostly iterative process. We have to do the formulation, select the risk treatment options, and move to the next round, planning and implementing risk treatment, and assess the effectiveness of the treatment, decide whether the remaining risk is acceptable, like I have shown you this chart as well. And if this risk is acceptable, taking further treatment if not acceptable. This is our new process. Assessing the effectiveness of that treatment is rewarded, taking further treatment if not acceptable. Like a jungle, we go to the one tree, and then I found that, and then I discovered another one. If something residual, I can't do anything. I look up to my process and then make another treatment. These are for start and stop, all we need to do for risk treatment process. Additionally, both versions are dedicated block on monitoring and reviewing for includes the assessments of the effectiveness. Information security, risk management cycles. Now we have got another change here. Previously, I couldn't see any risk management cycle in the previous standard. Now it has been divided into two major sections. One is strategic cycle, another one is operational cycle. Strategic cycle is in the long run. Operational cycle is on the daily, very short term. So operational cycle much more monetary values. Strategic is more conceptual, and then exception or the decision making. These are also we deal with other risky stuff as well. So this standard introduced the need for the risk management cycle, so divided into the two sections. This is a need for, in order to make security risk assessment for current situation and the threat landscape. And when you have done the risk management for, let's say, in 1 year, and if your risk assessment results and keeping up with the results, if nothing major changes, you don't have to do. For operational, for the year or maybe quarterly, you need to do, but strategic cycle is for the long term. As long as you haven't changed anything for strategic level, you don't have to do it for, let's say, in 1 year or 2 years. It's based on the corporate way of working. We have to also align with our corporate rules as well in order to make the strategic cycle. Strategic cycle should be conducted, as I told you, for longer time, or there is a major changes. What could be, for example, when you have changed your organization, when you bought a new company, you've got a new product which is impacted for the old company cycle. This is a quite strategic cycle as well. So when we summarize with what we have already done, Risk assessment and risk treatment updated, as you know, that for regular basis, or if there is something is changed. Strategic cycle, business assets, risks, resources, threats, target objectives, and consequences of the information security events for all the context of the organization. This can result as inputs of the overall update for risk assessments and also risk treatments for the long term. It's also input for identifying new risks and also initiate for completing new risk assessments. Operational cycle is usually we do it for daily basis. Input for information is there is a change for the criteria, affect risk assessment, and scenarios that should be reviewed or updated. When there is a review come to time, and then you need to do for operational cycle as well. But strategic cycle you are not supposed to do for your daily basis. Strategic cycle applies to the environment also for achieve its objectives, while operational cycle applies to all risk assessments for the context of the risk management process. For example, I will give our company way of working. When we released a new product for in the telco, is a major component, is a new, let's say 4G or 5G, and then you need to go for the information security risk management process for strategical level, because this new components will highly impact for your customers, your internal customers, means that your employees, and also your joint ventures, and also your vendors, and also your outsourced companies as well. So this is quite strategical level for when there is a big or major changes come into the existence. Context is section 6. Previously, we had it has already started in the previous one in 7, is a context establishment starting from the basic criteria. Here, risk management approach, as you see, risk evaluation criteria and impact criteria and risk acceptance criteria. Now is changed, you see, is organizational considerations, identifying basic requirements of interested parties. Interested parties that that means that people who are already impacted, what we have been dealing, how we are going to communicate, what is their interest to us, how we are going to meet their requirements. It could be either regulatory body, either NGO, either can be also your customer, also your joint ventures. These are all your interested parties. And then applying risk assessment. It is mostly the standard-based approach, because when we deal with the new standard 27001 and also another ISO standards, we will see for the organizational considerations, context of the organizational staff, and then identify basic requirements of interested parties. So these are quite mapped with the standards as well. 6.4, establishing and maintaining information security risk criteria, is important parties criteria for performing information security assessments, generally consequence. So standard looks up what is the consequence of your risk assessment and risk acceptance criteria, how you define it. So it enforces you have to show the result. And also likelihood and risk level, you already know from the risk management stuff. Impact consequences is defined in the section 3114. The word here, previous one is impact, now is being used by consequence. It's outcome of an event affecting of the objectives. Severity, also important part, is defined in the section 7, clause 732. Severity is the level of magnitude of a given consequences. So it maps with the consequences for the severity. Security baseline, we already know. Here is coming much more detail. Starting the risk assessment, we have to also define for applicable requirements. It should come up from the contractual regulation, internal rules, and actual statement of compliance. Where this coming from? It comes from identifying basic requirements of interested parties. So we will find out from this security baseline. Scope and boundaries. Organization of the security risk management. Previously, we have scope and boundaries. Now we don't have. Previously, we have an approach method we didn't have. Here, we need to choose an appropriate method. Again, you have to define your method yourself. It's a guidance here, it's stated, but based on your organization and your business, you need to define for your appropriate method. Previously, we've got in section in clause 7.4, Organization for Information Security Risk Management. Here has been omitted. This is for organizational topic reduced for general information in 6.1 and for organizational considerations. Again, method should be ensure always consistency, comparability, and validity. Risk identification. This is again a major change. Previously, we have asset-based, dealing with much more monetary values. Here, we are using event-based approach in clause 7.1, identifying for strategic scenarios through the consideration of risk resources and how they will use it, how it will impact for interested parties, and to reach those risk design objectives. It's a high-level assessment focusing on the different threat landscape as most appropriate for macroscopic analysis, where the assessment does enter the all architecture details. This approach is used to define, again, consequence and severity of a given scenario. Scenario, again, should be risk-based, not instant-based. This is one of the major changes from the standard. Again, we already know for asset-based approach, here, mostly for operational scenarios, which are much more detailed in terms of assets coming from the threats and vulnerabilities in deep assessments, focusing on supporting assets, again, as an approach for this context as well, and appropriate level of granularity based on precise architecture. This approach is used to define likelihood and severity of a given scenario. So you will see our foundation of risk management standard, which is 31000, here is separated into the consequence, severity, and likelihood, and giving a scenario. This is so divided into two major approach, event-based and asset-based approach. This is quite important because one of the biggest change in this revision extends for risk identification for this landscape. Can be run you can run this independently, but also you can make it run at the same time. It's a compulsory and complementary. The asset-based approach is bringing much more technical detail. Event-based is also more context to the assessment. And also proposition of the mapping between the two approaches defined in our next section as well. Risk analysis methodologies is, as you already know, for the risk expert, qualitative and quantitative. And here we put another one, semi-quantitative. Why we are using semi-quantitative, I will explain detail much more. Here is three pillars of the risk analysis process coming from this standard. This is again one of the major changes. Qualitative is using qualifying for attributes. You know that this is quite high risk or medium risk. If there is a DDoS attack, it's a quite high risk. I may lose all my company assets and I will maybe stop the business. Quantitative is much more scientific approach, more engineering stuff. I'm also engineer, and also more frequently and probability of the occurrence. You may know that all the operational level and for this kind of all risk components that we will use for quantitative as well. Semi-quantitative is using qualitative scales with assigned values. Why we use this, we will explain later, but bear in your mind that you need one point that when you make the risk analysis and come up with the risk assessment, you have to use your expert opinion. Numbers or attributes for high, medium cannot say you not, much more than the risk itself. So you use your expert opinion. So this is for semi-quantitative approach as well. Assessing consequence of likelihood of risk level. Now, this one, consequences, previously, we have assessment of consequences and assessment of instant likelihood and level of risk determination. Now, wording is changed, much more Shakespearean context, assessing potential consequences, assessing likelihood, determining the levels of risk. Now, new way of saying, but it covers much more information about the risk stuff, because consequences, we have already come across asset value information and also release for much more generic. Here we will go much more detailed. Likelihood, coming from the new standard, extends the implementation guidance, and it's the three basic sources for uncertainty. Which one is personal, methodological, and systematical? This one, it's the consideration to increase the reliability of likelihood. So this is likelihood stuff. It's much more comprehensive. Risk level is new standard, much more freedom in the determining of the risk level and asset value of an option, expecting that the calculation may not be clear, linear. So failure to the adequate preserve the security of information can lead to the confidentiality, integrity, or availability, which is our triad, as you know that, CIA. So loss of confidentiality, integrity, or availability can have further consequences for the organization and objectives for the further run. Consequence analysis can be performed bottom up, it should be, and from the information security and coming with the loss of confidentiality, integrity, and availability of the information. Remember, we have a matrix. We put risk assessment, and then we will say for the confidentiality value, let's say if you are using 5 to 5 or 4 to 4 matrix, we will say that it's a high, and we put, for example, number 4. Confidential is 4. And then we use for integrity, let's say we will put it 4. Availability, again, we put 4. Based on our matrix, we mostly multiply for 3 components. So this is for when we make the assessment, you are going to use this assessment process coming from this standard. As I told you, for event-based, and also asset-based approach, we are using for strategic scenario for operational based, but event-based, here you see much more strategical level. Asset-based is operational level, and we will use more scenarios, and then we calculate according to the risk assessment process. Coming up with this result, there is a risk origin using for our critical value, and likelihood we also determine according to this assessment, and also coming up with risk scenario, which is the risk level is 7 or 3 or 4, something like that. This is for the consequence of likelihood level of risk. We are going to use for this based approach, event-based and asset-based approach. We use for risk calculation, we use evaluation methods. Previously, we extend our description from in the standard much more comprehensive. We need to go 7.4, evaluating the information security risks, comparing the results of risk analysis with the risk criteria, prioritized with the analyzed risk for treatment. This is the process for evaluation of the risk. You see, again, we come across really fundamentals or basics of risk management process, again, starting from evaluation and prioritized for the risk treatment. Important statement for the risk in owners coming for this standard. Also, there is also another things. Good understanding of the risks that they are accountable. Now, I've been dealing with business resilience. I've been dealing with information security. I've been dealing with data privacy and anti-bribery. I always want to see the owner. Who is the owner? Who is the risk owner? It's very difficult to assign somebody, because they know that if I have assigned somebody as a risk owner, I have to enforce them what is the their risk treatment, how they are going to trade, what is the result. So they always don't want to do it. Now, standard enforces for risk owners that, look, it's not the easy world. You have to understand that what is the risks for you, because you are the risk owners. You have to take the action. ISMS manager or risk manager is not going to take an action. You are a risk owner. You have to take the action. So you have to take care of the process. This is puts the accountability for the risk owners. This is difficult stuff, because most of the corporate organizations, since I've been working for Turkish Airlines, we've got 60,000 people. It's difficult to assign or make people accountable for as a risk owner. But first, we have to explain or leave the context. What is the risk? How it will impact for their process. Otherwise, they will not, we cannot get them by it. It's quite difficult subject. You see here our standards coming from the SOA, Statement of Applicability. Here, standard also a good section, but very comparing with the previous one is the less comprehensive, because some of the parts are omitted. Why? Because we have already dealt with risk process as well in the previous section. Previously, we have got information security risk treatment and also risk modification, and we have the risk retention, risk avoidance, and risk sharing. Now, what we do is here, information security risk management process. And other one, this one, section 9 is already deleted, don't have here. Determining all controls that are necessary, implement the information security risk treatment options, and comparing the controls determined with those in ISO 27001. Having done this, you will see statement of applicability. You see, it's totally mapped with information security risk treatment process to statement of applicability. This one is one of the new changes. I will say one of the major changes, because I mean, being an expert, I haven't come across for the information security risk management for the statement of applicability as a risk treatment, security risk treatment process. Here, it enforces us for the producing of a statement of applicability based on the information security risk management process. This is also covering for, remember, our standard mandates us when you release the SOA, you have to write it down. Is this contour applicable? Yes. Is that applicable? Whether it's applicable, you tick. And you have to justify it. Why is that applicable? Is the same clause here applicable? If you want to exclude one of the controls, then you have to justify that why you have excluded. So this is again same process applicable like we have done in 27001. Security risk treatment, wording and the division of the chapters also differs quite significantly. 4 is ISO versions and leads to the risk treatment, I told you. Details here much more comprehensive, and also formulation stuff coming from the approval from the risk owners, and acceptance of the also residual risks should be also done by the risk owners. Statement of applicability, again, I told you, is a quite new context, and also implies that all necessary controls, justification, implementation status, and justification for all exclusions should be done in SOA document. As a part of the risk treatment, in case of risk modification, and all necessary controls should be listed, annex controls in ISO 27001. So what it forces us, you need to also buy 27001. Otherwise, this is, I mean, you're just having a context as a good guidance, but you need to have also 27001 in your hand. When it comes to here, its new standard uses general wording to accept the risks. New standard comes up with the treating all risks that maybe or simple accepting, emphasizing for the residual risks. Outcome is coming with the same way, but here in the new standard describes risk acceptance in more structured way. For example, let's give an example. It can be argued that to retain the risks, benefits from the accompanying for the risks that imported for business opportunity. Some of the risks that you can justify that acceptance criteria cannot be applicable, or some cases that risk owners retain that they don't meet the criteria. If this is necessary, the risk owner the risk owner should explicitly comment on the risks, and the decision should be made for the justification to override the normal risk acceptance criteria. So risk owner should explicitly comment the risks and include the justification and why they make the decision to override the normal risk acceptance criteria. Based on their opinion, of course, it should be applicable for them. It should be based on their judgment, but you have to, as an expert, assess to the situation. Communication and consultation for the monitoring and review. This is a quite new way of saying. Before that, information security, risk communication and consultation, the wording is changed. It's communication and consultation. Previously, information security and risk monitoring and review, and now monitoring and review. Communication and consultation is a dedication for the communication, as the content is very brief. Monitoring and review, ISO also gives much more attention for the monitoring and review, and also much more structured description. Previous one is quite I would say that I wouldn't like it because complicated is difficult. Now is much more concise. Again, the new standard is 27001. It's quite good one. So it's quite new and mapped with the new standard as well. This concept here is introduced, monitoring risk-related events. So when you monitor the risk-related events, you have to also uh, monitor them. So monitoring of the monitoring risk-related events coming as a topic for this standard. This is concept defined as French security risk technical community, and effective risk communication and consulting is also critical components for the information security risk management process. It guarantees to people for the risk management and to make the decision applicable for the risk management. Sharing and exchanging the ideas about risks also makes the policymakers and stakeholders for to handle the risk. Continuous risk communicated should be much more practiced, and then organizations should establish risk communication strategies, both routine procedures and emergency situations. Annex stuff, quite informative again. Here gives you examples and techniques for the support for the risk assessment process. Previous one is a definition. New standard provides you examples of the techniques that how you are going to make the assessment. Normative versus informative, again, is a two topics quite related each other. Normative, you always bear in your mind that is mandatory. Informative means that, facultative means that is a common way of saying, please understand that this will come up with a high risk, or I will do much more information if you want to follow our mandatory information, something like that. So we are informing the people in the common way of saying, normative versus informative coming from the standard as well. These are all elements presented in annexes for the readers, and then it explains how to use it. Of course, you need to get this standard to work and study on it. Primary asset and support asset definition coming from also a new standard. Primary or business assets, these are the information or process of value for an organization. For example, it could be, for example, HSM or some business value like Troya or something for our aviation industry, or for telco, let's say for NOC. These are the things that for primary for business assets. Supporting assets is components of the information system that which is one or more several business assets supporting for the business asset. Well, this is from my side. I hope you enjoy our context. It's valuable for you. I will just look at if you have some questions I would like to answer. If not, I am going to, we will have an exam. I would like to share it with you if you are okay. Okay. I will just, okay, then I will stop my presentation. Okay, my colleagues. Okay, good luck. Thank you, Eda. Remember, you've got 30 minutes.